Hey, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Logos Project. This is your host Dom, and in today's video, I am joined by my friend Harry. How you doing, Harry?
Harry Potter.
no, no, it's my friend Sam.
Well, my roommate sat on my glasses, so I had to get new glasses. That was you. You
You
remember
he
doing that?
put the glasses on the passenger
No, so
seats
actually, I was
in a
watching.
wrinkle, so I sat on it.
So actually, what happened was I was watching the episode with Matt Fradd and Dennis Prager.
Oh,
I know. Well,
yeah,
content aside or whatever,
yeah.
I was like, man, Matt Fradd has really cool glasses. So these are like the blue light blocking ones. I
Oh,
need new glasses
I
anyway. So
have
these were
some.
like $6. I was like, I'm gonna see how these roll. And then I feel like they're honing in my inner Harry Potter.
Yeah, definitely.
Debut with the girlfriend later on the night with
You
the glasses. See what she thinks. A little scar on the forehead.
Yeah, you need the scar. It's funny because I have blue light glasses, but I sit on them as well.
I have another pair that I bought for the
Yeah.
same reason. I was like, oh, these will look cool. They did not look cool. So I'm glad I didn't spend more than $8 on those. So if you want those, you can have them.
If you're trying to get rid of them.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, we are covering Harry Potter Book 2, The Chamber of Secrets. This is a pretty good book. It's underrated because it's kind of eclipsed by the unfolding of the story, which gets much more intricate, and the first book, which is kind of iconic because it's the opening. So unfortunately, book two gets a little overshadowed. I think that's unfortunate because it's a dang good book.
I You're right. I think it is kind of overshadowed. I think it's one of my favorites though.
Yeah, so
It
good.
sucks because the other ones are so good too. You want to like, and they get deeper.
Slightly, not too much. All right, we're
I don't want to hurt your
good.
big boy. The other ones get deeper and they get more intricate. And you're
Mhm.
right. I guess you're right. It does kind of take away from this one. It overshadows it. I think it's a good
Yeah,
word.
it doesn't. Yeah, you're right. So it doesn't take away in the sense where it's not like the book is not good, but
Yeah.
because we're all familiar with the Marauders or with the Sirius Black, the Prisoner of
I just started
Azkaban.
reading that one today. Oh,
Yeah,
because I finished book 2 just in time for this, and I got to get a little head start. I
perfect.
start school again next week, so I'm gonna be stressing. We'll see. I gotta squeeze in my Harry Potter time.
I'll help you with your papers.
Hey, all right. You and Chat GPT.
Okay. So, let's just jump right into it. Book two, Chamber of Secrets, is the second year at Hogwarts for Harry Potter, and one thing that I want to point out for the sake of our sponsors, HBO. Just kidding.
Someday, Dom.
In the book, there's a lot more time with the Dursleys, and we'd like to see that. I think if there's a TV show to be made one day, and there's a point where Harry is locked in his room by his uncle, right? And then that very night, the Weasleys in the flying car rescue him. I mean, the book is a lot more intense because Aunt Petunia gets mad at Harry at one point and like throws a pan at his face. Like
Hate when that
she
happens.
makes him clean the entire house. And then he's locked in his room without food. Oh no, they feed him like bread and water or something
Yeah, like through the
through like
or
this
like under
hole.
the door or
Yeah,
something. Yeah,
yeah, under the door. But he's locked in there for 3 days, right? Starving. And finally the
3
Weasleys.
days.
Three
Really? Well,
days.
that's clever.
Yeah. And the Weasleys finally come and rescue him.
They rolled the stone away, metaphorically speaking.
It's the resurrection.
Rah, 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 rah.
I don't know how I don't think she had that in mind, but who knows? Maybe she did.
Nah, probably not.
But anyway, Sam. So I think the first thing to point out is the role of a new character, a new species, in fact, which is the species of house elves, Dobby. Dobby's really cool for many reasons, but he strikes me as the stand-in for the typical uh kind of sneaky sidekick. Like Gollum kind of fits this in the Lord of the Rings, but Gollum is much more um, tempted by evil and corrupted than Dobby. Dobby's innocent, right? But you think of hobbits; that's kind of like house elves. They're little, they're innocent. I'm trying to think like gnomes or like in the Disney movies, you often have characters that are sidekicks, but they're little. Like
Yeah, well, so that's the thing is you don't realize or you don't know until maybe like at the end of the book you kind of get a little glimpse of how powerful Dobby actually is.
yeah,
But that's not explored at all throughout the whole book, is it? Do they talk about
in the
how
second book,
in the
no.
second book? Yeah, in the second book they don't talk about it at all, I don't think. Or maybe they say they're incredibly powerful, the house elves are. Somebody
I don't.
explains it to Harry.
Yeah, I don't know when it gets explained,
Yeah. Well, in
but
my mind, he kind of pops up like you said in a lot of Disney movies. You have like this little, almost insignificant, like comic relief kind of like Olaf
yes,
or like
Yes,
You
or
know?
in Mulan, the dragon,
Oh yeah, Eddie
the
Murphy.
little dragon, Eddie Murphy.
Eddie
Yeah,
Murphy. Yeah, or Donkey, like Eddie Murphy.
yeah, or
But
in Lion King, the boar and the
yeah,
little
exactly.
what's it called?
Meerkat.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
meerkat. Yeah,
But you don't realize. Actually, what immediately came to my mind was like Jar Jar Binks, where he's just like kind of there.
yeah,
Like, he's useful obviously
yeah,
sometimes, but
yeah.
I saw this cut of Star Wars where they just cut out Jar Jar Binks and like the storyline didn't change at all.
Yeah,
But
so that's Dobie. He's kind of the sidekick relief, but his story progresses throughout the books. They take him out so much in the movies, unfortunately. So we in the movies he shows back up in movie 7, and we're like, where did this guy come from?
mhm.
But no, he's been there the whole time in the books, so that's kind of unfortunate. I think Dobie and Percy, the brother of Ron, are two characters that lose so much screen time
Mm.
because in the book, and we'll see a little bit here, Percy's story it has a whole arc, right? And in the books, in the movies, it's just kind of dropped. There's like a hint.
It's just kind of yeah. I didn't even notice it was hinted at. I didn't read the books until after I saw the movies, and I haven't seen the movies since. So I got to
Yeah,
go back and like rewatch all
you'll
that. I
you'll
think in
notice
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Dobie, the first thing that is interesting, it's kind of funny about Dobie is that he tries to stop Harry from going to Hogwarts because I don't want. Well, I guess we'll give spoilers because we're just covering the story. But he's actually the house elf of the Malfoys. So Lucius Malfoy,
Mm-hmm.
his wife Narcissa Malfoy, and their son Draco Malfoy. He is the house elf. So house elves in this wizarding world are basically slaves, right? They're servants. They're like house elves, So
Very eloquent of you. That's
yeah. Now he hears about this machination to about the Chamber of Secrets. In fact, he hears Lucius speaking about opening the Chamber of Secrets, um, and that's about all he hears, I think. But I'm not sure how much he knows about the diary. All we know is that actually, he does know about that. At the end of the movie, he points out to
I was gonna
Harry.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just read that like a couple hours ago.
it's in the book. Okay, good because I saw the movie more recently than the book. But anyway,
I'll back you up.
good, good. Movie 1 and 2, I think, are the most faithful to the books. Maybe in 7 and 8 are also because they draw it out, but 1 and 2 especially. Then they just become summaries instead of movies, which is why HBO's got our back. Hopefully, you greedy money. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Anyway, so yeah, man. So Dobie tries to prevent Harry from going to Hogwarts, and the main way he does it is kind of hilarious, right? First of all, he does magic in Harry's home, which basically, what's the word I'm looking
Sets
for?
off the alarm.
Yeah, the Ministry of Magic hears about it because they have some kind of way of detecting that, and so the Ministry of Magic writes saying, if anything again happens, you're expelled. So, but he's not expelled. But he gets to the platform 9 3/4, and him and Ron are, last ones to go through, and the barrier is blocked. That's Dobie again. So they miss the train. They take the flying car that
Mm-hmm.
Harry was rescued in with. And another thing is that during Quidditch, Dobie, bewitches one of the bludgers, which is one of those balls that is hit by the beaters with their bats during the game to knock off other players. Kind of violent if you think about
Good.
it. um, so anyway, so yeah, so he and the bludger is bewitched to basically wound Harry, you might say. And there's a point where Harry's like, "You tried to kill me," and Dobby's like, "Not kill you, just maim you," because he wants to save his life. At one point, actually, Ron says, "You know what, Harry? If he doesn't stop trying to save your life, he's gonna kill you." That's again the humor.
Some comic relief.
Yeah, and I really like that. But yeah, so at one point, Dobie says, Harry Potter risks his own life for his friends. So noble, so valiant, but he must save himself. Harry Potter must not die. So Dobie is aware of a real threat this year, right? And so what is that threat? That's what we're going to get into. And it's really interesting the way she paints this picture and draws out this story, I think. And what do you think so far?
Nothing to add. You're just laying the groundwork.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
basically, yeah. And okay, Sam. So Ron, Harry, and Hermione are at Hogwarts. and the adventure begins. And this book, especially, all of them are like this, right? They're all set out in a detective story type way, where you start to suspect certain characters, and there's clues that point to who the bad guy might be. It's a very Sherlock Holmes type style
Hmm.
in a certain sense. But this one especially does a really good job. It's one big detective story, more I think than the others. They all have a lot of amount of clues, and like, coming together at the end with all the answers. But this one I think is particularly brilliant, and I'll try to explain why. But the first thing that happens is that Sir Nicholas, I can't remember his last name.
Flamel? No, wait.
No,
Are you talking about the ghost?
yeah, nearly
Nearly
headless
headless
Nick.
Nick. Yeah, I don't know
It's
this.
it's I'll put it up in the video, but Sir
It's
Nicholas,
right here.
some,
Just kidding.
something like the Pumpery or something like that. Anyway, and so he has a anniversary for the day he died, right? His death anniversary. So, and he calls it Death Day Party, and it just so happens to be on Halloween, October 31st. And he invites Harry and Ron and Hermione to go to the party. And so it's basically a bunch of ghosts together, who they can't eat, right? Because they're ghosts. And so they celebrate their death day party by having a bunch of food that's been there for ages. And it's supposed to be rotten so that it smells strongly so that they can taste it, but they can't.
Like, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's also a little like kind of macabre, right? It's kind of like, yeah, kind of it's kind of dark, like a bunch of rotten food on a table for a party for dead people. You know what I mean? It's
I don't think I analyzed it that deeply, I guess.
yeah. But here's the spin, and I don't think Harry knows this because Hagrid didn't really give him all the details. He later finds out in book 7. October 31st is the day that James and Lily Potter are killed.
I didn't remember that at all.
Yeah, so it's an interesting way to open up this
Is that
detective story.
is that like a foreshadow of some kind, or is it just
It's on that day he's celebrating the death of nearly headless Nick, is also the day his parents died. uh, you know, did she do it on purpose? Well, she picked October 31st. She knows it's Halloween. She knows it's the day they died. I think so. It's fair to say.
hmm,
Now, she also at one point in the interview with Oprah mentions how the books exist because her mother died, and they wouldn't exist if her mother had not died. JKR.
hmm.
And she explains that because her mother died and because she loved her, Harry Potter exists. So the main theme of Harry Potter is really about when we're faced with death, we ask ourselves really important questions. And the only answer to death for JKR really is love. Now, clearly, she's drawing from her Christianity here. We'll also see how she's not what we would typically call an Orthodox Christian, right? She's kind of a British socialist, progressive Christian, and I find her to be very inconsistent in the way she thinks. Uh, if she ever watches this, we still love you, right? But I find her inconsistent in the way she thinks because if you look at the totality of Harry Potter, I mean, what is it about? It's about the baby who lived from the attack of the serpent, right? It's if you think about it, if you really think about it, it's the most anti-abortion story you can think of. It's about the baby who lived,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the most anti-abortion story you can think of. In other words, the ends don't justify the means, and life is important from conception to natural death. And this is why my huge criticism of the books is in book 6, which we'll look at. I feel like it's good to put this at this juncture.
Is that where Grogu eats the eggs?
Yes, it's where Dumbledore is dying because his hand is cursed, and so he asks Snape to kill him, right? And so, in other words, because he's going to die anyway. So, in other words, it's the theme of euthanasia, where I'm suffering, I'm gonna die soon anyway. Just pull the plug. The whole series is almost like a ode to anti-abortion. It's like
Just in the importance of life, basically.
yeah, it's like a pro-life book. It's about the boy who lived, and it's about not killing children. So so my point is that JKR is pro-abortion in the sense where she sees it as being pro-women, and I can understand that. Uh, you know, it's like if you argue for the badness of one act, but don't bring up, which I think Catholics especially do bring this up, but this is the argument, right? If you don't bring up the situations that place women in that situation,
Hmm.
then you are being inconsistent. I would argue that a lot of Christians aren't being inconsistent, specifically Catholics. I do think
Absolutely agree.
there are a lot of Christians that are inconsistent, but usually it's usually not Christians. It's usually kind of secular, agnostic people who are against abortion, who are not being consistent with caring for women. That's usually what I find. So it's more of the kind of secular political wars that's at stake here, not really Christianity, which is why I find her position interesting. Because and inconsistent, because it's a book about life. It's 7 books about life, right? It's about facing death and the idea of love, especially the love between a mother and her child. You see what I'm saying? So this is where I find her inconsistent. So what she's pro-abortion because I don't know how much pro-abortion she is, like where she draws the line. But either way, and her reasoning is because women get the raw end of the deal, basically. But that's just a political observation. What do you think?
I love politics. Um, but I mean, yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. It's I mean, I definitely wouldn't criticize the artwork. I think criticize it in the sense where it's like, hey, I think she's inconsistent with her beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's funny that she took kind of this route, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the underlying, like the core,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the snake, under the underlying Hogwarts. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Is there's something deeper there that she's uh
Tapping into.
tapping into. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something deeper that she's tapping into that maybe is inconsistent with the way that she's voicing her opinions, or the way that she's living her life, or the way
That's
that
yeah.
her surface level opinions are kind of manifesting.
That's exactly what I
When
think.
they and that's the issue
Yeah.
though, is that people just don't dig that deep.
Yeah, because she has an incredible imagination. She knows classical literature. She knows Dickens.
Hmm.
She knows Lewis. She knows Chesterton. I think she's part of a Chesterton club, right? This is why I'm confused sometimes by her. But anyway, so she's definitely not orthodox on the surface. You might say she's very progressive, and and I use that term sometimes as a compliment. I think progressive could be a compliment, but in this case, I'm not using it as a compliment. I think she's progressive in a bad way, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay,
Wait, how
I just
often do you
want,
use progressive as a compliment? Is I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
Well, when I write about theology, I think that progress. I'm using it the way Saint Vincent of Lorraine would use it.
Well, the way progressive probably should be used,
Yeah,
because if something's
exactly.
progressing.
It just means development. He calls progress in religion. It's basically the idea of development of doctrine,
Yeah,
a deeper,
that's good.
yeah,
Yeah, deeper understanding.
deeper understanding, and but it's for the sake of a deeper continuity. And so, creative thinking, but that a creative thinking that is faithful, right? There's these paradoxes and these tensions that you need in order to actually be faithful. That's why someone who is not creative but kind of solidified in a system of thought that isn't open to some further refinement, I would say you're not actually being faithful, even though on the surface you are in continuity with what appears.
Hmm.
That's what I'm saying. When I say progressive, in this case, would be a good thing. So you always want to be both progressive um, and I guess traditional would be the same thing. But at the moment you're traditional without being progressive, progressive without being traditional, you're missing the boat. I think, right? And so it's sometimes people think it's going too far to this side, too far to this side. I think it's going beneath the spectrum actually, and realizing that these are two aspects of a deeper truth that transcends the entire platform.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does make
So some
sense.
people think, well, you need to be more progressive over here. You need to be more traditional over here. I'm saying you need to leave that platform and go deeper and find the essence of things. That's what I mean. And I think that's the way to go. That's what she's doing in her books. But I think she's inconsistent by living on that plane. She should stick to diving deep into her imagination, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right. That was a tangent. So
Love a good tangent.
the death day party. But what happens right after that death day party, if you remember, Sam, is they leave. Finally, they're like, oh, that was something else. And Harry starts to hear voices, right? And then at one point, I think it's Ron or it's Hermione. I think she says, "Harry, hearing voices is never a good thing, even in the wizarding world."
Yeah.
And they come across Mrs. Norris, who is petrified. she's turned into stone, not literal stone. She's basically frozen, right?
The form of stone.
The
What-
form of
I'm
stone.
just kidding.
So that's the first instance.
Well, real quick. So what do you feel like is the significance of the Death Day party? Because you brought that up and now I'm like, I don't feel like that was like essential to the plot at all. It just separated them from everybody else at the Halloween party.
Yeah,
Made them look suspicious.
I don't think. I mean, if there is a deeper meaning, the reason I brought it up is because it's not in the movie. That's number one. Number
Oh, word.
Yeah, and number two is because it coincides with the anniversary of Harry's
Yeah, that's really
parents' death.
interesting. I didn't know that.
But yeah, no, sorry to disappoint. It's
Yeah.
not like there was a grand spiritual meaning behind that I know of.
Death Day represents the ostracism of nearly headless Nick, whose head is ostracized from his body. Nearly.
Moving on.
I'm just-
So Mrs. Norris, which is the cat of the caretaker, Mr. Filch, they discover the cat in the corridor, petrified. And on the wall is written in blood.
Is it written in blood?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
That's spooky for book 2, man. We're still young in book 2, bro.
I know. So actually,
Can't be writing in blood.
I know, but it turns out it's the blood of roosters. You'll see why.
I know why, but like,
Oh, you do?
no, I don't
okay.
remember that at all.
I'm pretty sure she used the blood of the rooster. Oh, spoiler alert!
I think there's like a grace period on spoilers, and I'm pretty sure 15 years.
But I want to build up a little bit. But okay,
Yeah.
so anyway, it's written on the wall. The following words: "The chamber of secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." So this is what starts the whole detective story, right? And it's in a corridor right next to the bathroom, and there's an overflow of water and all over the ground. Mrs. Norris is petrified, and these words are on the wall. So then unfolds this whole question: what in the world is the Chamber of Secrets? The title of the book. In the movie, they asked Professor McGonagall to tell them about it. In the books, it's not her actually; it's Professor Binns, which they never show Professor Binns in the movies. Professor Binns is the teacher of a history of magic in the books, and
I was wondering if he was in the movies. I was because
No.
I was reading the book today, and I was like, I don't remember this guy at all.
yeah, I know, yeah. And the story goes, it's pretty funny, is that Mr. Binns was teaching history class one day, and then sat down while the students were doing some homework or something, and dozed off. And then he got back up to keep teaching and left his body behind because he had died. He was so old, and just kept teaching. And so they removed his body and buried him, and he's still to this day a ghost professor who teaches history of magic.
And they don't have to pay him, which is really nice. It's very progressive.
So in History of Magic, Professor Binns, who usually goes on long monologues, long lectures, and the students are trying to pay attention, they're falling asleep. Suddenly Hermione asks him about, Professor, could you tell us about the Chamber of Secrets? And he's taken aback because no one ever asks him questions. He's used to just lecturing and people leaving. And so he goes ahead and explains it to them. He says, this is a legend. It's probably not true. And he explains that basically Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 founders of the Hogwarts houses, which we talked about last week, not last week, but last video, basically created a chamber somewhere in Hogwarts that's secret, that no one knows about. And he left a monster in that chamber that would come back years later once his heir opens the secret chamber, releases the monster, and the monster would purge the school from any wizards that come from Muggle blood, right? Muggle are the non-wizarding folks.
Are you trying not to say mudblood?
But no,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding. It's like
mudblood,
profane.
basically mudbloods. Yeah, in Harry Potter, mudblood is a racial slur, for lack of a better term. And so you have the purebloods who believe that the wizarding race should be pure magical blood, and any intermingling with Muggle blood actually diminishes your magical powers. And Rowling goes at great lengths to show how that's actually not even true in the system of her worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually has examples in her fantasy worlds of wizards that are more powerful than purebloods who are from Muggle descent. So, anyway, and so that's the whole idea here. Salazar Slytherin is kind of like a stand-in for Hitler, right? And Voldemort as well, eventually, who is an heir of Slytherin, as we'll find out. Spoiler alert. They stand in for this idea of a pure race, get rid of dirty blood, so she can use this, very well for themes of racism, anti-Semitism, and she does so, right? And so I think she does so well. What do you think? I think that was a good opportunity there.
Yeah, that mixed with the kind of the side story of Dobby and the
Yeah,
oppression of the house elves as well, I
yeah.
think is.
Yeah, and again, these all come from Christianity. The idea of the poor, or the idea of the slaves, or the idea of social class. Now, where it can become into Marxism is when you see the world in terms of political action, right? Instead of with Christianity, see when you have class oppression, you might say, or when you have institutional oppression, the Christian response isn't to start a revolution, right? This is kind of the Marxist way of thinking. So I'll
Hmm.
start with the Marxist response. The Marxist response is to point out the oppression and the injustice, and to emphasize it, and to push people to a revolution which upsets the status quo and creates a utopia where there is no longer class oppression, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and so the Christian way of doing things is the understanding that man, because he's fundamentally flawed, because of what Christians call original sin, right? He does, original sin doesn't destroy the goodness of man's nature, but it wounds it deeply, right? Because of original sin, relying on ourselves in political action to bring about a utopia is always going to be a recipe for failure. It's going to be a recipe for violence, blood, and history has borne out this truth. Anytime we try to push through our own political action for a world without injustice, ironically, it creates a lot of bloodshed and injustice. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So the Christian response is that because we are wounded, we require something external to ourselves to come and save us. In other words, grace. And so the Christian response is to leave room, not through political action, but through self sacrifice for the workings of grace. And that, ironically, that non action is ultimately a divine action that does make the world a better place. So, in the books, especially with Hermione, I find it interesting in book five. She actually, you know, shows how Hermione is kind of naive because she has her spew thing, SPEW, pushing for the rights of house elves. And but Dumbledore is much more wise. He's like, I think Hermione's heart is in the right place, but she's not being realistic, you might say. Anyway, the whole point being is I don't think we don't really get to know, at least not in the books, what JKR's opinion is on this. But the impetus for justice is Christian. We just don't want to make it become political action that ends up relying on ourselves. You see what I'm
Well,
saying?
so where's the where's the place for political action in the Christian world? Because you're
Yeah,
not saying no political action.
politics is the realm of ethics, is what I'm trying to say. If something is a policy that creates injustice, we want to vote for people who are not going to promote that policy, right? So
That's straightforward. Yep.
yeah, so that's the realm of ethics. But what I don't want politics to become is the realm of eschatology. What I mean by that is that politics becomes a messianic engine to usher in a new world.
The utopia where it's
Yeah,
like, hey, if we get all the laws just queued just right, then we'll have this perfect society where everybody gets along. But the
exactly.
reason they're getting along is, if they even are, is because they're following the rules as opposed to
Hmm.
out of love for one another. Right. So
Yes.
it's, yeah, it's
Yep.
really, you got to have like this structure that's holy instead
Hmm.
of man made. And if you're following that, everything else just kind of falls into line.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it's like when you look at leaders in politics, when you look at your own town, your mayor, when you look at politics in general, right? Policies, immigration, stuff like that, all these questions, the crux, the real question you should be asking yourself is what is right and what is wrong?
That's it.
And what can I promote?
Yep. We got to act in truth and we need to promote
Yeah.
the truth. And that's what
Bingo.
you said. And a lot of times that means standing your ground, being firm,
Yes.
and being willing,
Yes.
God forbid,
Yeah.
to
To lay
die
your
for
life
that.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's That's not your truth. That's the truth. You gotta.
But what Marxism does is it goes beyond right and wrong. It actually it's man taking into his own hands the shaping of reality,
Hmm.
right? So we have all of these structures of oppression. So we're gonna create a system or push an ideology or push a this is what we're going to actively do to change the world. And it becomes where it's no longer about what policy is right and what policy is wrong. It's about how can we get to a point where there is no longer any justice by something that we can do through a program. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. That was a tangent. Let's get back to Harry Potter. And so they basically, encounter Mrs. Norris. But what happened is that before Harry encountered Mrs. Norris as petrified, he got into a spat with Filch, the caretaker, Argus Filch, because he was wandering in the corridors because of the Death Day party,
Hmm.
right? And so when Filch finds out about this and sees that Harry was at the scene, at the crime scene, he assumes Harry is the culprit, right? Which kind of it makes sense at the surface that he would assume that, and so that doesn't look good. And the fact that they were there while nobody else was there, and the cat was petrified, and then all the students show up, it looks like Harry is suspicious,
Caught
or
red-handed.
Ron and Hermione, right? But we'll see. It becomes more and more Harry. Okay, so
Well, part of that too, just a key point I think in the narrative here is that basically that's where Harry finds out that Filch is a uh
is that that moment?
yeah, what is
I
it? What do you
well,
call it? A non
not yet, not yet.
magical person?
Yeah, he eventually finds this out, but he sees in Filch's office a book with simple
Where
spells.
does he figure it out then?
I think it's later because it looks suspicious. Maybe Filch is the one. So it's kind of set up where we're not sure. But yeah, sorry, it's called a squib.
Squib. Yep.
Yeah, someone who is of wizarding blood, which kind of goes back to what we're talking about, but actually doesn't have any magical abilities. But maybe you're right. I'm sorry. I thought it was later. It doesn't matter though.
Yeah, yeah.
But eventually, that adds to Filch's animosity towards Harry. That Harry found out he was a squib,
Hmm.
right? So yeah.
Well, he thinks that's why he's a target. That's
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
saying.
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
that Filch might be a target to
Because he
kill.
blabs. He's like, he knows I'm he
Oh
found
no,
something on my desk.
you're
That's why he's
right.
targeting me.
You're
Yeah,
right. Sorry. Yeah,
that's all right.
absolutely.
That was like earlier today, so you're forgiving myself.
Earlier today. Okay. All right. So anyway, but time goes on, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione, of course, they suspect Draco Malfoy. Why? Because he gloats about it. Maybe it's him. And so they need to find out, what's going on because this is bad. Things are happening in the school. So Hermione says, "I have an idea." She says, "I'm going to make some polyjuice potion. It's going to take about I don't know. It takes a month or two. I can't remember how long it
Yeah,
takes.
something like that. A month, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right." And she says, "I'm going to create this polyjuice potion. You two, Harry and Ron, and are gonna basically turn into Crab and Goyle, which is the sidekicks of Malfoy, and Hermione's gonna turn into what was her name? Is the Slytherin girl?
Yeah,
Doesn't matter. Up in the box right here.
it was a name that sounded like I don't know, Maleficent. It was like something
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
where it's like, oh, clearly she's like one of the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded like militant.
Yeah. I can't remember. It's right there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so and she makes the polyjuice potion. Polyjuice potion basically is a concoction. You add a little piece of hair of the person in it, so they have to steal some hair from them, like secretly pluck it or something, and they turn into by drinking it those people. So that's what happens. Hermione unfortunately grabbed a piece of hair off the clothes of the Slytherin girl, and it turns out it was cat hair. So she got the raw end of the stick and had to stay in the bathroom while Ron and Hermione, while Ron and Harry got to go to the Slytherin common room, and they finally make it in and ask Draco, and Draco basically admits, "I have no idea what's going on," but he's pretty happy about it because he's a pure blood and he wants to see all the mudbloods get out, go to Dodge.
Kind of messed up.
Kind of messed
Yeah.
up. Kind of messed up. Yeah. It's kind of the typical bully. Like my dad, he's a pure blood.
But it's like weird, like what? Because like clearly the school would get shut down, right? Like it's not going to be like, oh hey, we
Yeah.
now have this wonderful world where people I don't like don't exist. Like
Yeah.
it's so short sighted.
Well, no, because at first they don't believe in the Chamber of Secrets. They think it's a prank. They all think it's a myth. It's when it's suddenly, okay, now we have 3 petrified people. okay, this might be real, and so they're getting ready to have the students all go home, and that's when Harry discovers the Chamber of Secrets. That's how she sets it up.
Well, no. So
But
the point I'm making is that Malfoy being excited about the
oh
prospect
yeah,
of all these people getting killed
oh
or
yeah, yeah,
even just petrified.
yeah.
Like there's literally nothing good for him that could come of that.
Well, the purebloods would rule, right?
Would they? Just because of something that's weird that's happening at Hogwarts?
Well, the heir of Slytherin would take over, and
The
no.
whole world? I don't know. Oh, maybe
Well, that
maybe you're right.
area, that's good, right? If you're a pureblood.
Well, so the issue is that, like, let's say it's a small country that he's taking over that
Yeah.
area. Well, it's like, well, actually, people start dying, and now nobody's allowed in that area anymore. Like everybody just disbands. Like I don't know. It just seems
I see.
short sighted.
I don't know. Yeah.
Cut that out too.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying, because if
What I'm saying
the
is that-
bad guy rises to power and wins, then that's a plus for the people who support the bad guy. If Hitler wins and you're for Hitler, then you want Hitler to win. Like, you see what I'm saying?
Maybe in my mind, it seems that only
Sorry.
this whatever this thing is only going to attack people at Hogwarts. That like seems clear to me. It's not like,
Oh, I see.
hey, like the Chamber of Secrets is open. I'm gonna kill everybody at Hogwarts, and then I'm moving on to your mom's house, and then your dad's house.
Well,
and
that
then-
was my assumption.
really maybe
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, maybe that's
Well, I mean, if
maybe
the
that's
heir
what
of
he's like hoping
Slytherin
for.
is for a pure blood world, Hogwarts isn't the only place.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
the point we get to, right? Where it's like, oh, it says in the first book that every we'll call him defector, every person who joined the
Mhm.
dark side
Yeah.
during Voldemort's rise to power was like
Mhm.
Slytherin. I was like, well, that's
Yeah.
pretty sus.
Yeah.
I know you can't go.
Yeah.
What was that? Tom Cruise movie where people are guilty before they're guilty.
Minority Report.
Yeah, you can't go Minority Report on them, but like,
Yeah.
if somebody's killing people, like maybe, oh, and they claim to be the heir of Slytherin, maybe like maybe it's one of the guys in green. Maybe
Yeah.
we should keep an eye on those guys.
One thing I did notice, because there is a kind of rigidity to the story that people, because there's videos out there saying all the plot holes in Harry Potter or something like that, right?
It's not a plot hole.
I know, I agree
Yeah.
with you. I agree with you. Or like a school that's supposed to be the safest place in the wizarding world, and there's a 3-headed dog, a giant spider, a snake in the basement, and a forest filled with murderous centaurs.
You should see the rest of the world.
So people make those videos, and on the surface, right, sure, I get it. But here's the thing. It is kind of a caricature because she's channeling archetypes, right? The school represents your soul, and your soul is a dangerous place, but it's also the safest place in a certain sense, because, a healthy soul is powerful, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's not naive. It's not
Yeah,
harmless.
exactly. Because some stories are just badly written, and I'm like, that's ridiculous.
I don't even mean this as a
No, I'm not-
criticism.
I'm talking about you.
Yeah,
I think you're right in pointing out
course
there's
I
a
am.
little bit of contrivedness, right?
Yeah.
In the story, because it's like, I thought you said this is the safest place. Why aren't they all going home or something? Several times people mentioned that.
I'm like,
And-
yeah, nobody died. Like, it's fine.
And people are right to mention that. But what they're wrong, I think, in doing is dismissing it as bad writing. No, it's just she's channeling something else here. You see this in The Hobbit. You see it in the fairy stories. It's just part of the story.
Yeah, what I would argue too is that it's like the world that she built revolves around Hogwarts. I know there's like other schools and stuff, but those are like, it's literally like
Yeah.
other countries, like other
Mhm.
things are going on. So every character has like some tie to Hogwarts.
Yeah.
So if it's like, hey, every important thing that happens in this town happens in the town square, like that's not weird,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's exactly right. You have this play where it's a stage, and the stage is the town square, but the play is about the town, not just the town square. So it just so happens that everything happens in the town square because it's the play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's just that's the way classic literature always has worked, really. And if there's a shift in location, it's like it's a shift in scene. You know what I mean?
That's the way the
yeah.
90s 90s sitcoms work as well. Because
Exactly.
you don't want to build 5 sets, you just have the
I mean,
you just have the
actually-
central perk and you have the apartment. Like you don't need anything else. so.
Actually, yeah.
I'm half joking, but all right.
Yeah. Okay.
a lot of
Yeah.
tangents.
So, Penelope, Penelope Clearwater. She's not in the movies either. I think there's one shot where in the second movie you see her, and that's it.
Well, so they actually give them all like names, I think. So all the supporting like students that are just like there
Oh,
in the
yeah,
background,
yeah.
they're all like they have different names.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh yeah,
I think at one point, what's her name? Brown, something Brown.
Lavender Brown.
Yeah, Lavender Brown.
Hmm.
I just realized that's two colors. She like changes race like between the second and third movie or something.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
she wasn't like addressed in the first couple movies, and
yeah,
then they just like changed her character like
yeah,
completely.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
like, who's gonna know? You
yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah, so Penelope Clearwater, turns out it becomes Percy's girlfriend. So that's one of the plot twists. She adds all of these different plot lines and ties them all up at the end. And some of them are pretty insignificant, others are pretty crucial. But the fact that there's so many kind of throws you off the trail of the what's it called when you
Yeah,
discover
you don't
it.
know which clues are important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so Penelope Clearwater's Percy's girlfriend, and she's actually the other girl with Hermione that ends up petrified because of the mirror. So in the movie, it's just Hermione, but in the book, Hermione is with Penelope, and they have the mirror together, and they together get petrified. So that's another difference. And that the reason why that's important is because of that plot line with Percy. He seems to be hiding something. We're all wondering what it is.
Hmm.
Another contendant for Slytherin's heir. So which
I knew he was innocent the
yeah,
whole time.
yeah, no, it's like he's clearly
Yeah,
innocent.
he's
Yeah,
well, he's a pureblood though. Like
he
maybe, and
is.
they hammer that home a couple times.
The Weasleys,
If
yeah.
she was trying to do that, I actually didn't even realize it. Maybe I just wasn't thinking that hard.
But here's the thing: who does it end up being?
What do you mean? Who does it?
Who's
Yeah.
doing all the stuff?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and she's pureblood as well.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
find out in just a bit.
Yeah, because somebody's watching this has never seen Harry Potter. They're like, these guys are talking about Marxism. He's not a wizard.
So Ron at one point, because they're all talking about Slytherin's heir,
Mm-hmm.
he says at one point in the book, if the Sorting Hat put me into Slytherin, I'd be in the train home. So because he doesn't want
I don't remember that. That's
to
pretty good.
have anything to do with it. But remember, we read in the last video that the Sorting Hat said to Harry, "You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head." And so Harry starts to have doubts. Maybe it's me, because the way the book sets it up is quite fascinating. So here's what I point out in my notes here. The entire buildup to make the reader think Harry is the heir works because of what we discover in book 7, namely that Harry is a Horcrux, right? So
Well, to be fair, just because they literally just plug it in, and you don't realize the significance of it.
no,
But at the end of at the end of the second book, the one we're talking about, Dumbledore literally tells him, "Hey, when the curse
Yeah.
backfired, he like left a piece of himself in you."
no, he doesn't say
He
that.
tells him.
He left a connection.
Uh,
There's no way no way.
he obviously isn't saying like Horcrux because
Yeah.
he doesn't know that at that point.
Because I remember
think,
the wording
but-
is he left some of his powers.
Okay, I'll let that slide.
I think that's important though.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
you're right. Well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
definitely important. I just assumed that he was kind of foreshadowing there.
Well, the problem, yeah.
Whoa.
Anyway, well, it's just there's no way she would reveal the Horcrux in book 2. You know what I mean?
No, but it's clear that there's like they have a connection.
of course.
Yeah,
But everyone knows that.
I thought he said, "Hey, like he
But what
leaves a
is
little."
the connection? Remember that part where the Sorting Hat talks about it's all in his head being part of Slytherin, and so Harry starts to wonder, what if I'm the heir of Slytherin? Now there's a whole slew of petrified people, and I find this really interesting.
Well, quick plug too before we because we've
Yeah.
already passed it. I think he puts the hat on again to like confirm the first time he goes to Dumbledore's office. He puts the hat on again.
That's
I don't know
right,
that that's
yeah.
in the movie or not.
I think in the movie he just talks to it, but in the book
yeah,
he
yeah,
puts
yeah.
it back
Yep.
on, like you said.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
And he the hat like confirms. It doesn't really have like an opportunity to like explain though.
Yeah.
He like immediately takes it off and he's like, "You're wrong."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and that's super important because the hat seems to say you do good in Slytherin. The snakes,
that's a compliment.
The snakes Harry can talk to, and we all know Salazar Slytherin was a parcel mouth,
Mhm.
right? It says in the books. So that means he can hear. Let's just leave it at that. So the big
Are you
monster.
worried about spoilers?
Yeah, kind of. But I shouldn't be. The monster
That's funny.
in the Chamber of Secrets is a basilisk, which is a type of giant snake, and so he can hear the voice of the giant snake. And not only that, but he gets scolded by Filch, as we said before. We find Mrs. Norris petrified, and he's annoyed at Colin Creevy
Mm-hmm.
at Quidditch right before Colin is found petrified. And he's known to supposedly hate muggles because he hates his aunt and uncle whom he lives with.
Yep.
So there's a kid who puts out this theory and lists all these things, and it's very convincing. And so Harry's like, maybe I lose consciousness when I attack people. We just so find out that that's exactly what happens to Ginny, because Ginny is the real culprit.
Mm-hmm.
She does lose control when the diary takes over, right? So you see how clever the way that is. But here's the thing: because he's a Horcrux, because and the at the end of the book, he talks to Voldemort. Voldemort says, there's a connection between you and Voldemort because of what happened that night, with the killing curse.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at Voldemort and Harry, and you realize they're both half-bloods, both are orphans, both are raised by muggles, both speak Parseltongue, both are resourceful, both have determination, and they both have a certain disregard for rules. And so you add that to the fact that he can hear snakes, he starts to wonder, I was meant to be in Slytherin, maybe it's me. And everyone else thinks it's him because of the duel when he talks to the snake. They thought he was telling the snake to attack the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
So see how she sets it up. So we all think it's Harry. Oh my goodness.
What's really interesting there about the duality of men? So just kidding.
Duality.
Dualism. Dualism for shizzle. No, so the point I'm making is that she builds up. It's like the similarities between the good guy and the bad guy, right? And it's like this element of, I hate to use the word power. I feel like that's loaded, but the idea is like, hey, where's this energy getting poured into, right? Like you have the same building blocks, right? It's the decision that to be bad, right? And that's ultimately what the Sorting Hat kind of drives home too, right?
Yes.
It's like, there's a lot of similarities. That's what Dumbledore says actually at the end. Now that
I have
it
the
comes
quote.
out of my mouth.
I have the quote.
I don't want to skip to the end here, but
but it's an important quote.
Yeah.
It says in chapter 18, the last chapter, the Sorting Hat only put me in Gryffindor, said Harry in a defeated voice, because I asked not to go in Slytherin. Exactly, said Dumbledore. Sorry, I misread it.
Are you trying to do your Dumbledore voice?
No.
I got it.
So, exactly, said Dumbledore, beaming once more, which makes you very different from Tom Riddle. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. That's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm a pretty smart guy, so
yeah.
Just kidding. I could be headmaster.
Yeah, Headmaster Laurie.
Headmaster Flex Knight. Yeah, that was basically the point I was driving home.
It's excellent.
He put it really well.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, excellent. So
it's very progressive of me with all your pronouns.
But yeah, so we find out that the ghost Moaning Myrtle had basically been killed by the basilisk 50 years ago when Tom Riddle opened the Chamber of Secrets.
It's crazy that never came up, like with the staff. They're like, oh, we have this ghost haunting the bathroom. Like a student died.
Yeah.
We have no idea how she died. Like we just didn't ever ask her any questions. She just woke up dead.
I hate to do this to you, but they do know.
The staff does?
Yeah, they blamed Aragog. That's why Hagrid got expelled.
Oh, when they're talking about a student died, it's Moaning Myrtle. Yo, you're so right. Wow.
It's okay.
How's that for a plot hole? It's not a plot hole. It's just a gap in my neurons.
All right, that was funny.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. You're like, hate to cut it to you, but
no. So okay, but here's the thing, right? So the ghost Moaning Myrtle, who haunts a girl's bathroom, so she's upset by the teasing of Peeves 50 years ago. Peeves, the poltergeist that we've talked about. So she runs back to the bathroom to kill herself because she's depressed, right?
Yeah, which I thought was kind of dark for like a
very dark
teen. Yeah, it was like you could have just been like, you could have said anything else. Like,
I know.
I was like, Lord.
So yeah, book 2 is dark. In fact, at one point, someone says this. I thought this was really good. The screenwriter says to JKR, "This world is cruel." She responds, "It's as cruel as our world," which is such a JBP thing to say. Jordan Peterson.
Depends on what you mean by cruel.
And the screenwriter says, "Oh yeah," and JKR says, "It's a mirror image, and just as they can solve things that we can't solve, so they can create problems that we don't have, and that's always been the problem for Harry. That he enters this world and believes it will be an escape, and it's not. Human nature is human nature, whether or not you can use a wand.
That's really interesting, right? You think about the kind of this essence of, well, we talked about it in the last episode, right? Where it's
Hmm.
like, Harry is just like kind of clinging to this idea where it's like, I'm being raised, and every teen kind of goes through this, like, these aren't my
Hmm.
real parents. Like,
Yeah.
I have real parents somewhere,
Hmm.
magical parents who like
Yeah.
have it together, and like their marriage is good, and
Yeah.
they like
Yeah.
they never ground me, and
Yeah.
everything's perfect, and I have an allowance, and yada yada. But then you kind of, there's a point where you get past that, right? It's an escape for a little bit. But even if, I guess in this case, like, it really does happen, right? Where he
Hmm.
does have a magical set of parents that
Yeah.
he doesn't really know that much about.
Yeah.
But there's a point where even you get to that and you got to grow up, right? And
Hmm.
you realize, okay, like, life's not as easy as I thought. Things
Yeah.
are more complicated. The hero's not always the hero, and the
Hmm.
villain's not always the villain. You got a Heath Ledger thrown in there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and in fact, she's tapping into Tolkien here as well as Chesterton and Lewis. This idea that we have to protect children from the harsh realities of reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is, I think, misguided. Obviously, you don't want to traumatize kids by, I don't know, terrifying the living daylights out of them. Okay, but I think billions of children have read The Chamber of Secrets, and as far as I know, there isn't like a therapeutic practice open for children who have PTSD from The Chamber of Secrets. But here's the thing: it's like you actually see this in other literature as well. Children's literature can be dark. In fact, Tolkien wrote an essay called something about the perilous realm. Okay.
Well, part of that idea of like escapism too is that you have it's not right, and that's kind of brings me to the difference between Marxism and Christianity that you were talking about earlier, right? You have one which is like, hey, how can we best, right? Marxism, how can we best avoid injustice and alleviate, we'll call it sin, alleviate suffering in the world, right,
Yeah.
through policy.
Yeah.
But that's not the Christian message at all. The Christian message is to pick up your cross. You
Yeah.
bear the responsibility that you have to bear.
Yeah.
And I think what you were alluding to earlier is bear your responsibility. Don't bear the responsibility for the world. Like, we can't,
Yeah.
I can't handle that. I can't
No.
handle that.
Yeah.
I can barely handle my own sometimes.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, some people have to be governors, some people have to be mayors, some people have to
Yeah.
be, but it's not, as Jordan Peterson says, clean your room. Like, make
Yeah.
sure the stuff that you're responsible for, right? Your area of responsibility is taken care of. And
Yeah.
then you can seep out to your area
Yeah.
of, influence.
Yeah.
Your area of,
Yeah, it's like the circle of concern versus the circle of influence.
yeah, I'm using military terms, but it's literally exactly,
Yeah.
that.
No, exactly, and that's been so helpful to me. That image of, it's where those overlap that you want to spend your time, concern
Mhm.
and influence. If you're in concern but not influence, you're going to be drained, and you'll be actually not able to carry out your job, your mission, your responsibility. But if you spend time in the overlap between concern and influence, like the Venn diagram, right? And when
Mhm.
you spend time there, that's where you're golden. So get off Twitter, basically. Okay, so as we were saying, the entire buildup to make the reader think Harry is the heir works because, as we discover in book 6, but also as Dumbledore says at the end of this book, that there's a connection between Voldemort and Harry. So it all works because he's a Horcrux, which is brilliant in the grand scheme of the 7 books. It's really cool how she's weaving in the whole plot of book 6 and 7 into book 2. We also saw how she's weaving the plot of book 7 when it comes to Deathly Hollows into book 1 with the stone. What's it called?
The Resurrection Stone.
No, the other one, the Philosopher's Stone. Sorry, the title. The Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Oh,
not,
you
it's,
said book 1. I'm sorry.
no, it's fine.
Yeah.
So it's not the same stone, but they're both stones that are meant to help you have life. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the way Dumbledore uses that trick with the mirror echoes almost directly the book 7 when it comes to Deathly Hollows and being the rightful owner,
100%.
willing to
Yeah.
accept
Oh,
death.
yeah, and that's so good.
Yeah.
Well, what I would argue too is that this whole, like, I'll use the word again, duality of like him,
Yeah.
comparing himself to Voldemort.
Yeah.
I think that echoes the entire plot of this book alone. Even though it echoes, it's a theme that runs throughout and it's super important to the whole thing.
Yes.
It's literally the entire book where it's like he
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
he learns that he speaks Parseltongue,
Yes.
and he's like, oh, I'm one with this snake, and then
Yes.
he seeks out the snake to kill it.
Yeah.
Like, what's more
Yeah.
masculine and awesome than that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's like you have all of the themes are always there from the very beginning. And yet you're still somewhat surprised as they unfold, because it's almost like she tells you the whole plot in book 1, right?
Mhm.
And in book 2 as well. But it's there in book 1 too. She tells you the whole thing, but she tells you the contours.
Yeah.
Book 2, she gives you a deeper understanding of those contours. Book 3, she gives you a little bit more on the backstory of the characters. Book 4, she goes even deeper and shows you like this new facet of the same thing she told you in book 1. Book 5, book 6, especially book 6, she reveals the structure of the story in its inner workings. And book 7, she explains the entire thing. But book 1 has the entirety of the whole saga contained in it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's brilliant because it's the Christian story from the very beginning to the end.
And
It's,
that's the and I
yeah.
mean you know from the beginning that it's like, okay, like Harry's gonna live, the bad guy's gonna die. Like
Yeah.
so and
Yeah.
you're right. And it's kind of like the analogy of like a mystery, right? Where it's like you understand it, but
Mhm.
there's so many levels of depth and you just continue
Yes.
to understand more and more and more. And that's what
Exactly.
makes it beautiful. That's what makes it art.
And that's why it stems from and is connected to the Bible, because the Bible is it's the pattern. It's a biblical pattern of typology,
Oh yeah,
of
absolutely.
shadowing. Excuse me. Of a truth that has different facets. The more you move along in the story,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's she's tapping into the way the Christian, the Hebrew and Christian Bible is written. It's the very structure of Christianity is in Harry Potter. It's just brilliant. That's why it's so good. That's why if you check out our video on book 7, you'll see how everything we've talked about so far is contained in our video on book
Mm-hmm.
7. So okay, let's move on. So at first the evidence points to Harry, right, Sam? But then the evidence starts to point to Hagrid, because what happens is that the diary is framing Hagrid, right? Harry against Hagrid, so that it has more time to do its work, right? The person in the diary who's mysterious, it's Tom Riddle. But so eventually, though,
Mysterious riddle.
yeah, that's very good. Yeah, but at the end, it's the person that we least expected. It's Ginny Weasley, right? And so this is where it gets good, man. This is where it gets so dang good. Um, Let me read a section, if you don't mind, from chapter 17 of the second book. Is that okay with you?
I consent.
You sure? You hesitated.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something funny.
Oh, okay. So, chapter 17, the heir of Slytherin. It's going right straight to the heart of it. It's the reveal. Who's the heir of Slytherin? And so here, it's basically Tom Riddle talking to Harry in the Chamber of Secrets underneath the school, right? Underneath, not just the school, but underneath the lake. The Chamber of Secrets is actually underneath the Great Lake, the Black Lake,
Mm-hmm.
which is super important. So Tom Riddle says, I have many questions for you, Harry Potter. And Harry says, like what? Harry spat, fists still clenched. Well, said Riddle, smiling pleasantly, how is it that you, a skinny boy with no extraordinary magical talent, managed to defeat the greatest wizard of all time? How did you escape with nothing but a scar, while Lord Voldemort's powers were destroyed? There was an odd red gleam in his hungry eyes now. Why do you care how I escaped? Said Harry slowly. Voldemort was after your time. Voldemort, said Riddle softly, is my past, present, and future, Harry Potter. So this to me is crucial in understanding how JKR is setting up Voldemort, what he represents. And it gets even better because I got this from Harry Potter Wiki, right? Harry Potter Wikipedia, right? What?
I got nothing to add to that.
So this kind of summarizes what's the plot of the book 2, right? When Tom Marvolo Riddle was in his 5th year at Hogwarts, he achieved his goal of locating Salazar Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets and used his ability to speak Parseltongue to open it. He further used this language ability to order the Chamber's basilisk to terrorize the school and hunt down the Muggle-born students. Eventually, one of the Muggle-borns, a Ravenclaw girl named Myrtle Warren, was killed by the basilisk. Riddle would later use this murder to infuse the journal with a piece of his soul and transformed it into his first Horcrux, which, if you watch our video on book 6, we explain what a Horcrux is. After Myrtle's death, Albus Dumbledore, then Professor of Transfiguration, began suspecting Riddle. Knowing it was no longer safe to open the chamber and that the school might be shut down if the perpetrator was not caught, Riddle framed Rubeus Hagrid and his pet. It's an acromantula, right? Aragog.
Obviously.
Aragog, for the crimes. So he framed Aragog for the crimes and earned himself an award for special services to the school. He imbued the diary with other powers so that the chamber could be opened again in the future. So now we're back in the present. In the beginning of the book, Lucius Malfoy put the diary in Ginny Weasley's cauldron when they were in Diagon Alley, and no one saw that.
Mm-hmm.
Dobby did, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so she confides Ginny, right, in the diary. She tells the diary about her infatuation with Harry Potter, and she's the one that is forced and almost like possessed. This dark stuff, right? To kill the roosters because turns out basilisks are afraid of roosters, as you've just read about,
Mm-hmm.
probably. Yeah, and but spiders are afraid of basilisks. So it's interesting that when
It's
they,
like rock, paper, scissors.
yeah, exactly. We know what's so fascinating how this detective story is so cool. Every time they discover a petrified person, they find spiders leaving. So they assume that that matches with the tale 50 years ago that it was Aragog who was the monster.
Mm-hmm.
It fits. So you're thinking throughout the whole book it's a spider. But when you find out that spiders flee from the basilisk, it then makes sense that any spider in that vicinity would be visibly fleeing from all, holes in the wall and stones and everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
she flips not just the framing of Harry and the framing of Hagrid to Ginny, but even the framing of spiders to the basilisk. It's always switching, and at the end, it all ties together. To me, when I first read the book for my first time, it blew me away. I was like, so satisfying to discover who the culprit was. It's like Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, so basically, she killed the roosters. She opened the chamber. She wrote on the wall, Ginny Weasley, this little girl. She tried to get rid of the diary as well because she realized, like, I'm being controlled by this. Harry finds it. Ginny throws it in the bathroom. Harry finds it, and then Harry gets, starts to believe that, well, it's Hagrid. And so they go ask him, well, it's not him. Well, that's weird. Why would he tell me that? So Harry goes back to get the diary to ask, why did you say it was Hagrid? And turns out the diary's gone. Ginny took it again because she saw it in Harry's stuff, and she didn't want Harry to find out that she was guilty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I think it might have been she didn't want to find out that she liked him or something.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
didn't want. Yeah, she didn't want to find out he was guilty, or she was guilty,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay. And so that's what led her ultimately to the chamber. The diary finally gets its last grip on her and brings her to the chamber. Now, this is the crux of the entire story, man. This is, I think, the genius of the whole thing as it unfolds. Because here, first of all, well, Harry, who is the hero, right? Who struggles with that darkness inside, but through his choices decides to overcome it, right? Goes down through the sewers, you might say, right? To underneath the school. In fact, we find out because the tunnels lead to underneath the Black Lake.
So you said that was important earlier. Why is that important?
Because the serpent is found underneath water.
Oh, like the Leviathan?
Exactly.
Really?
Because baptism is understood to be a judgment because the water is that which brings about destruction and chaos,
Mm-hmm.
right? It brings creation is the separation of the waters
Yep.
in Genesis 1.
Yep. And the waters represent that chaos, like the unknown, the
It's
unformed, like
yeah. So
chaos.
that would be like, say, Jordan Peterson tapping into Jung and Joseph Campbell
Mm-hmm.
talking about chaos as the opposite of order. The way one way to theologically put it might be like potential or like or even nothingness, you might say, versus existence and pattern or logos.
Right. So for something to be properly ordered, you have to name it, right? So you think about like creation and like
Yeah.
all the animals coming forth, and then Adam gives them all a name.
Yeah.
And that's like the final, like,
Yeah.
hey, this is structure. This is what it is.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what it is, and so you can put a name on it.
Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, right, he who shall
Mhm.
not be named is identified with that chaos, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
uncertainty that's in the wizarding world.
That's I was thinking of that very thing in a completely different way,
What do you got?
but I think that's the point
Mm-hmm.
because you have this way this sense in which you don't name Voldemort because there's no explanation for the chaos he brings. It's not something that makes sense. He's just evil, and evil doesn't make sense.
That's
It's
it. Yeah.
right. So that's the way and I never thought of it that way, and I think that's absolutely consonant with the Hebrew understanding of God in a certain sense. So God and Satan are opposites, right? But in the Hebrew Bible, it's God that's not named. because there's a sense in which he transcends our categories of making sense of him.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: in Voldemort trying to say, "I am he who will not be named," you have the Luciferian grasping at divinity,
Yeah.
right?
The original sin right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning,
Wow.
or the angelic
This is
sin.
good. This is
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
but
I see what you mean.
yeah, but that's the thing. Man imitates the angelic sin in his original sin by
Mhm.
grasping at divinity, which is what Satan tells him he should do, right? And so what you have here, that's why when I read that passage about Tom Riddle saying Voldemort, Lord Voldemort is my past, my present, and my future, he's making himself not just he who must not be named, but he who transcends time,
Yeah.
because he's
He's
immortal.
divine. Yeah.
He's divine and immortal, right? And so he is doing the Satan play. But guess what? Harry is the exact opposite. So, but that's why they're so similar. And so the word that I couldn't think of when we did that other video was nemesis,
Good
right?
word. Good word.
Harry and Voldemort. Voldemort is the nemesis of Harry. But that's why they're so similar, because they neither can live while the other survives, right? It's like oil and water, and it's like existence and nothingness. It's like love and hatred. It's these are not binaries in a certain sense. It's more than that. So a binary might be odd numbers and even numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Both exist. But when I say good and evil, one exists, which is good. Evil doesn't exist.
It's a lack of good.
Exactly.
Like hot and cold.
Yeah. So the experience of evil obviously exists. No one's going to deny that. But evil in itself is like the hole in your sock. It makes your experience uncomfortable and, expand that discomfort ad infinitum. And that's when you have horrible evils that cause horrible suffering. But it's always that lack of structure, that lack of order, right? And so there's a sense in which Voldemort is destroying his soul by trying to be immortal. He's becoming nothing by trying to be everything. But Harry, by losing his soul, finds it, right? So the two different opposite ways of doing things here. But that's why I find it so interesting that Tom Marvolo Rideau, he writes it in the air and rearranges it as I am Lord Voldemort and Lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's claiming to be God, right? Is you see this in all the movies and all the stories, especially some nowadays. Or thinking of like when we saw Tenet or some Marvel movies where the bad guy says there is no God, that's why I had to step in. Right, the new one we watched, right?
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
The Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
So it's Thanos. Like, I'm doing what everyone else is afraid to do. Right? Is wipe out half the universe. I'm gonna decide what's right and wrong to save everything. Right? So there's a sense in which by doing that, they destroy themselves. That's why in book 6, as we'll see, she talks about the process of a Horcrux actually rips the soul apart because it's unnatural. And the term unnatural here, she says killing is unnatural because it's the opposite of what actually fulfills human nature. It destroys human nature because human nature is a gift. We're a gift. The more you give yourself, the more you find yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Voldemort takes, and that destroys him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the dynamic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's fantastic.
Okay, that's good. So I just want to read something about Nemesis. King Arthur has a nemesis called Mordred. And the Arthurian legends are so Christological because they're influenced by Christian
Oh,
monks.
absolutely, yeah.
And also she is very familiar with this as well. Now listen to Mordred, which is interesting. More to Voldemort, more death, more dread, the fear of death. Maybe, I don't know. That may not be the exact etymology, but that's interesting to find. Mordred, Voldemort, and I got this from Arthur'sLegends.weebly.com. Just I want to make sure I reference.
Great website. He has that bookmarked.
So Mordred was known to be Arthur's greatest enemy, sent to destroy him. His parents are Arthur's half-sister, Morgause, and Arthur himself. His stepfather is King Lot of Orkney, and his half-brothers are the knights Gawain, Agravain, Gaheris, and Gareth. With his ability to prophesy the future, Merlin warned Arthur that a boy born on May Day. Come on, a boy born at the end of July. Okay, it's a different month, but you see the prophecy that Merlin is set. Anyway, born on May on May Day would grow up and cause the fall of both Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, almost like the Death Eaters. But here, Arthur is the bad guy. Is not here, but he's saying this is from the perspective of the bad guy. But it shows you this they're opposites, oil and water, but they're similar, right? And so I'll continue. I'm sorry. Hearing this, Arthur decreed that all boys born on May Day were to be placed on a ship. Sounds like Herod almost, right? And sent to Europe to find new families. Unfortunately, the ship was caught in a horrific storm and wrecked the ship before it reached its destination. Only one boy survived. Vindication through ordeal. He survived the ordeal of water, which is death and judgment.
Mm-hmm.
He
Ah,
survived.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Baptism.
didn't see that coming.
It's all
Yeah.
there. It's all there. And so one boy survived. Mordred. He was raised away from court, away from his real family, right? Until he was a teenager. Harry Potter, right? And then he came to Camelot and joined the Round Table. His actual identity was unknown until it was too late. You also see this in the play, a Shakespeare play. Which one is it? I'll put it right here. So Mordred was instrumental in uncovering the adultery of Genevieve and Lancelot to King Arthur, forcing him to sentence the queen to death, while Arthur pursued Lancelot, or in some stories, the Roman Emperor Lucius. Mordred seized the throne and married Genevieve. So Mordred conquers Arthur and marries Genevieve, Ginny.
Ginny. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Which is, both of those are like derivatives of Virginia, virgin.
Exactly,
So
which is the point.
You rescue the virgin.
Harry, like St. George,
Exactly.
rescues the virgin from the dragon
Yep.
that's underneath the water, which is the ordeal that he's vindicated by being rescued by the. Remember?
Oh, yeah, the Phoenix.
Phoenix.
I didn't know what you were getting at there. But
fair enough.
yeah.
But what is it? What a Phoenix is?
Yeah.
He who comes back from death.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
And he literally brings him back from death, from the cusp of death.
And by crying, and so actually about that, turns out, Sam, this is so good. Okay, so the suffering of the Phoenix is healing. So what I mean by that is that, Christ enters into our wounds with his compassion. That's what the incarnation is. He enters into our suffering, right? So when the Phoenix sheds tears over Harry's wound, the sense in which that heals him, the compassion of Christ, which the Phoenix is a symbol of Christ, that compassion in entering into our suffering, because that's what compatire, to suffer with, is what compassion means.
Mm-hmm.
That heals Harry, and then it rises him up out of the chamber of secrets, which is underneath the.
It literally
waters
picked
of
him
death.
up and flew him, out.
Literally,
Yeah.
because Phoenixes just so happen to have incredible strength. They can carry incredible weights. Christ carries the weight of the sins of the world, right? So come on, this is
so good.
Clearly
That's so
Christian.
Good. Yeah, no, that's so. There's a couple things you said there. Obviously, I the gist of it, I was like, oh yeah, baptism. Yeah. I was thinking like psychologically, where it's like, like we talked about a second ago, right? He's like going down. There's a portion of him that is the snake, right?
Yes.
And he's trying to conquer that piece of him.
Yeah.
And what's cool about this, I think, is the fact that he does get bit, right? So you think about like, hey, what is the cross that you bear? Oh, I gotta, to tie Jordan Peterson down, I gotta clean my room, dude. That's not gonna kill you. You know what I'm saying? But there are times where it's like you literally, there's something that you have to sever off of yourself, right? That is, the chaff. You got to separate the wheat from the chaff, and that might bring you close to death.
Yeah.
And it's the point where it's like, this is actual danger. Like, this is a point at which he could have actually died.
Yeah.
And things escalate, as Harry gets older and as the audience gets older and as the books get a little bit darker. But this is like the time where he has come into contact with death, and it's like he is dying, and that's what he comes back from. Yes. So he's like all the way on the edge of,
Absolutely. In fact, that what you just said reminds me of something crucial. It's this passage I wrote down, a note I wrote down. What you just said reminds me of the fact that, so Harry stabs the basilisk in the head with the sword of Gryffindor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the basilisk bites him in the arm, right? And so guess what it says in Genesis 3:15, right? The seed of the woman, he shall crush your head and you shall strike his heel. Now, strike for a snake means bite.
Mm-hmm.
So Christ, right, in dealing the death blow to death, dies, but thereby has life, right, through the power of the spirits. But the point being here is that it's through the wounding of Christ, right, that death is conquered. Harry is wounded, but he crushes the head of the snake anyway with the sword, and then through the Phoenix is saved from death and brought out of death itself. But you notice, it's basically what you're saying is that, although you trample the dragon, you don't come back the same.
100%.
right?
There's something in you that dies,
Something
and you're brought back
absolutely.
as something different, a new creation.
And in book 7 it's the Horcrux,
Hmm.
right? But each time it's something that dies, and that's growth. That's the next leap, the next phase, the next stage of a deeper, fuller life. So yeah, Harry goes down, and in a sense dies, right? But is rescued by the logic of the Phoenix because of the self-sacrifice for the Virgin. Christ dying for the Virgin Church, because the
Hmm.
church is called a virgin in the early church. The fathers speak of her as a virgin, right? And so, it's Saint George rescuing the Virgin from the dragon, and its resurrection, and it's all there. It's just incredible.
The only thing we didn't talk about is Gilderoy Lockhart, like at all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, there's an end credit scene at the end of Chamber of Secrets. I didn't know
Is
that.
it in the book
Uh, sorry,
after the
sorry,
end?
post
No, I'm just
credit.
kidding. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it's like 5 seconds long. It's really short. It's the camera in somewhere in the Wizarding World, kind of panning down in a street, and it doesn't say it, but it's Saint Mungo's, the hospital for maladies.
I do remember that. I do
Yeah,
remember that.
and
Yeah.
there's a picture of Gilderoy in a crazy straitjacket, going, "Who am I?" you know. So that's how the movie ends. Because you missed that part, because I think it's in book 5. They go to Saint Mungo's. They meet with they see Neville's parents,
Hmm.
and they see Neville's grandmother, and they see Gilderoy, and he's like, oh, you want
I
an autograph?
forgot. Yeah,
Yeah,
that they see.
yeah.
Yeah, you want an autograph?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know who I am, but I heard it was pretty cool back then or something. I don't know. But anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. All right. Well, coming to the end of book 2, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Last thing I want to point out, Sam, is, and I think I pointed this out in book 1, is that the books successively are very good at adding elements that become meaningful and useful for the future plots. So,
That's good writing, just in
yeah,
general, I think.
she's building with building stones, you might say. And then by the end of book 7, you have a wizarding world,
Hmm.
right? At the core of which is the Christian story. But for example, in book 1, as we mentioned, we discover that Hagrid had been expelled, but we don't know why. In book 2, we discover why. That's an example of what I'm trying to explain, is that she'll mention things in the books. Later on, you get deeper insight into what that is. So, and also she'll use things like Polyjuice Potion. She introduces Polyjuice Potion in book 2, but then it gets used in book 4 as a major plot twist, as a major theme. And it's also become super important in the Deathly Hallows, book 7, for when they try to break into the Ministry of Magic.
Hmm.
So, but she that wasn't in book 1. So book 2, she introduces it. And another thing, for example, is, and we talked about this, the motorcycle in book 1. Well, in book 3, it becomes hugely important.
Hmm.
She couldn't have made it important in book 3 if it wasn't mentioned in book 1. And that seems insignificant because, well, yeah, if you write a story, you start drawing from it. No, but the things she adds actually do in a very pivotal way.
Yeah, it shows forethought. Like she has some kind of
Exactly.
map, even if she doesn't have all the.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. But yeah, so the Phoenix is brought up. The House Elves then become prominent. Name Tom Marvolo now plays a huge theme, especially in book 4. Polyjuice Potion, as we see.
Yeah,
So
and a little glimpse into his background too, which is big.
yeah, that's it. So that really concludes. Wait, what did you just say?
I said in a glimpse into Tom Riddle's background, which is
Yeah,
big. Yeah.
yeah, it plays a big part in book 6 as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. So that's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I think really the big takeaway is the fact that the hero wrestles with his nemesis, not just externally, but even internally. And he conquers him by going down into the depths of the water, slays the snake, but is wounded by it. And then the principle of the Phoenix is where, because of his laying his life down for the Virgin, who is Ginny, he is therefore able to, with the Virgin in death, rise by the power of the Phoenix out into life from death. So you have this is applicable psychologically, the way we approach the world, right? When it comes to our issues, it's also applicable theologically, and I think it's applicable when it comes to the very structures of reality. Period. Right? The logos is imbued in reality and manifested in story. And so in story, we discover a deeper level of reality. We go deep down underneath the school of our existence, our ordinary existence, and rise from that experience, usually of suffering, right? There's a certain logos to suffering that
100%.
leads to
Absolutely.
resurrection,
Hmm.
to a new to there and back again, right? You come back changed, something different, something wiser. So that's the story of Harry Potter. And again, in each book, she finds a way to encapsulate the entire series. Book three, a little less, but we'll talk about that next time. So to end with a quote from JKR is she said, "We do not need magic to transform our world." Well, she doesn't sound Marxist here. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to imagine better. That sounds a little bit like John Lennon. Imagine. anyway, JKR, thank you for your stories. I wish you'd stick to the stories, but we love you anyway.
We'll see you on HBO.
See you HBO. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you enjoy our content, consider supporting us at patreon.com/The Logos Project. Thank you all, and have a good evening. Yes, or morning, or whatever. Bye.